It's time for the Double Stop with Brian Sword.
Welcome to the Double Stop Podcast. I'm Brian Sword. On this week's show, I'm talking to guitarist singer Richie Kotzen. Now, he's found some pretty big success lately with his new band, the Winery Dogs, but his career actually goes back a good 20-25 years, and he's probably played on that many different records. Richie was on a recent episode of Dean Del Rey's show, and they talked a lot about what happened with him and Poison. So I focus on different areas of Richie's career. He's done a lot of stuff, so there's lots to talk about. So here it is, my conversation with Richie Kotzen.
I was born in Reading, Pennsylvania in 1970, and no one in my family played music. My great-grandfather came to the United States from Italy, and he did play the guitar. He played the Italian folk songs for my mother when she was little, but I never met him. Got his guitar, but I never met him before, so I was not around musicians when I was very young. However, my mother and father were very much into music, so the house, there was always music being played. And my mom loved rock. She saw everyone from the Beatles, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, The Doors, you name a band back then, and she saw them. So all those records were in the house being played. My father, on the other hand, was into soul music, so he had all the R&B stuff. So my background with music were those two variables. And around the time when I was 5, I was going through a phase where I used to like to sing and dance and try to entertain the family, and someone suggested piano lessons for me. So I took piano lessons for maybe not even a year. I didn't really like the learning part of it, going and reading music and playing these little songs that they teach you. But shortly after that, by the time I was 7, I started the electric guitar, and I saw that at a yard sale, and I just knew that was the instrument that I wanted to play. I think a big part of that back then was, for me, the band Kiss. A lot of kids just, loved Kiss, and I knew they played rock and roll, and they looked cool, and I didn't see anyone playing a piano in that band, so decided I wanted to play the guitar, and I started taking private lessons at that point.
And how long were you playing until your first band?
Well, by the time I was in 7th grade, I guess I might have been, 12 or 13, I met an older kid, and he was a guitar player, and we formed a band with some of his friends, and that was my first band. I remember my father had a carpet store back then, and he had like a grand opening, so we set up on the lawn, and we were playing like Beatles songs and Elvis songs, and the guy from the radio station was there, and I remember him saying, "Oh, these guys are good." I'll never forget his voice when he said that. It was really funny, and my friends and I were joking because he sounded kind of like a nerdy guy, but he did give us a compliment, so that was nice. And then
That's pretty good at 13.
Yeah, and that just evolved into a band where me and the same guy, eventually when I was 15, and he was a few years older than me, he might have been 17 or 18 by this point, there was an older musician that was in the club circuit, and when I say older, he was still in his early 20s, but we were just kids. And he took a liking to us, and we formed a band with him, and he kind of took us under his wing. And he named the band Arthur's Museum. And that band became my first real working band where I would go out and play clubs and make money. So, 15, 16, 17 years old, I was playing 4 nights a week in the club circuit in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. And it was an interesting time. I was on a work-study program in school. The reality was I would get out on a half day and come home and go to bed because I would have to go do a gig that night. But that's where I got a lot of experience was playing 4 nights a week and playing live. It was a big part of my development, and also being able to play with older guys that at the time, knew more than me. I had the opportunity to learn firsthand.
And was that a cover band, or did you do originals as well?
That was a cover band, and we were on the cover circuit. And then by the end of it, we started writing songs, and we did an EP. So somewhere out there, there's a vinyl floating around. I've seen it. I know there's people that have found it. And we made this EP, and then we had interest from a label. I think back then it was CBS, and they called the house. Wanted to hear more songs, and unfortunately, that's where the band kind of dissolved because we were never able to get it together to give them more songs. And then by then, they wanted to stay on the cover circuit. I hated playing cover songs, despised it. And I really wanted to make original music, and I ended up submitting a demo that I had made to a label called Shrapnel Records, an independent label based in San Francisco. And they didn't sign me right away, but they did feature me in their column in Guitar Player magazine when I was 17. And then right around the time I graduated high school, they offered me a recording contract, and then I went to San Francisco and did my first solo record.
Now, on that particular record, you worked with Jason Becker. How big of an influence did he become on you?
Well, I didn't really know Jason until I got there. And because I was so young and had such little studio experience, and Jason was close to my age, within 6 months, and he had already done 2 records, so he knew how to do it. Mike Varney, who was the guy that ran the label, decided to have Jason co-produce my record with Mike Varney. So Jason actually ended up doing most of the production on the record and just kind of overseeing and guiding me and helping me. I mean, I didn't really know very much at all about being in the studio and how to get a guitar sound and that sort of thing. So I definitely learned a lot. Not only how inspiring he was as a guitar player then and advanced, but also just knowing the craft of how you go about getting different tones in the studio and all that sort of thing. So, and then the fact that we were so close in age made it even more more fun, because I could relate to him, and we became very good friends throughout the making of that record, and kept in touch through the years.
And working with Stu Hamm and Steve Smith, were you in the studio with them, or was that all done separately?
I was in the studio with them. We tracked the record together. And I will tell you that I learned a lot from Steve Smith in particular, because the record was done. I had all my solos done, all my rhythm guitars were done. And Steve heard the record. I was back in Pennsylvania. And he freaked out and said, "Oh, my God." He said, "You got to have Richie come back out here." And the label was like, "Why? What's going on?" He goes, "The rhythm guitar tracks are just terrible." He said, "You can't release this with me on this record." I'm like, what do you mean?" He goes, "Well, Richie's rushing to the point where it's making me sound like I'm dragging and like I'm out of time. You got to come back and fix it." And so Steve offered his studio in his house, and so I went in. This time it was just me, Steve Smith, and an engineer, and he explained to me what I was doing because I had no idea what he meant. And he said, listen to where the beat is. He goes, listen to the click track and listen to where you are. And that was the moment, that I discovered when people talk about time and playing in time. That was the moment where I discovered what that meant. Because I used to hear musicians talk about, oh, this guy has good time and all that stuff, and I didn't know what the hell they were talking about. And Steve Smith really sat down with me, and I spent 2 weeks or more, I think, really going over those rhythm guitar tracks and making them feel like, that we were playing together. So that was a big moment for me.
Now, around that time after that record came out, I'm pretty sure this is when it happened, is you got a cover of, I believe, Guitar World with Nuno Betancourt and Reb Beach.
Yes.
Which became a pretty famous interview. It was off the first record, correct?
Yeah, that interview was, I remember I was so thrilled to be on the cover of that magazine. And then I read the interview, and it was, I don't think anything I said was in there. It was, for some reason, maybe because there's three of us and everyone's talking at the same time, but there were some, I don't remember specifically now, but back then I remember seeing my name and a quote and said, my God, I never even said that. What in the world is going on here? But, probably back then I was mumbling and, I was very quiet anyway, so probably, even if I did say something, you would know what I was saying.
But what really struck out about that interview, though, was the other guys were raving about you.
Oh, really? I don't remember that. Oh, that was nice. That was very nice. Well, I know the thing that kind of odd about the whole scenario was, they were in these bands that had platinum albums, and my little record came out on an indie label. It probably barely sold 30,000 copies, but I guess some of the people at the magazine really liked what I was doing with the guitar, so they offered me that cover, which was a great opportunity for me. It was very cool. Now,
in that interview, you talked about how in a couple of weeks later, I'm going to be starting my next record. I'm going to be doing vocals.
Well, that was the plan. I mean, from the beginning, the plan for me was to be in a band with a lead singer. I mean, I never, ever really saw myself being an instrumentalist. I made an instrumental record because that was a great opportunity, and that's what was offered to me. My band was never offered a record deal. We didn't have that chance. Had we been offered a record deal, I would have signed it. So that didn't happen. So I had the opportunity to make an instrumental record, and I did it. But all along, I knew I wanted to be in a rock band, and I wanted to be in a band with a lead singer. My old band had two lead singers, so, we had really good harmonies and stuff, and so that's what I wanted to do. And so the way that all came about, I wasn't even thinking of being a lead singer when I was 15. I mean, I did sing. I had two songs in the set that I sang lead on, but it was just kind of a novelty. So when I came time to start writing for the second record, and that's before I was even on the cover of Guitar World magazine, I was sending demos of songs that I wrote, and I was using the guys that were in my band, the Arthur's Museum band, and I was having them alternate singing because I wanted to, use one of those guys on the record. And for whatever the reason, the record company president didn't really like the vibe. He didn't like the way they sounded on those songs. And he said to me, he said, I really think that you should sing. I'm like, what do you mean? He said, I think you should sing. He said, I think that's who you are. That's what you should be doing. These songs you need to sing these songs. And I'm like, really? I said, okay. So I remember I started trying, singing, and I had never sang in a studio before, so I'm singing on my 8-track, my little demo machine. And I remember recording myself and listening back and just thinking, all right, I don't like the way I sound when I say this word, like any word in particular, but at the end of that phrase, I don't like the way that sounds. Why does it sound like that? And I started listening to singers, people I liked, early Rod Stewart, Paul Rogers, and I started really getting into it. And then I ended up deciding that, okay, this is, new territory, singing on an album, but I'm going to go for it. I'm going to do it. And then by the time I had all the songs written, I was in L.A. and we did that interview you were talking about. And then I flew back to San Francisco and I recorded the record.
Now, that record, I think the vocals on that record probably led you to the Interscope deal because Dream of a New Day got kind of retweaked and put on the Bill and Ted's soundtrack.
Well, I'll tell you how all that came about. You're right. When we did Fever Dream, when that was finished, I had numerous major labels that wanted to sign me. And basically what they had to do was buy my recording contract from Shrapnel Records. So I eventually decided to sign with Interscope, and they were a new label at the time. But they had, some very powerful people involved, so everyone knew it was going to be a great label to be with. And so I signed the deal. And interestingly enough, before I get to the Dream of a New Day song that you're talking about, I ended up having to give another record to Shrapnel Records before I went to LA to do the Interscope record. And the thing in the contract was I would have to give them an instrumental record. So that was a very hard thing for me because I really didn't want anything to do with making an instrumental record. And I remember I made that record that was called Electric Joy. I wanted to call it Electric Toy because the guitar being a toy, being electric, and I was just a teenager, so I had these stupid titles, and they wouldn't let me call it electric. He wouldn't let me call it Electric Toy for some reason, and then I got stuck with a record called Electric Joy, which I friggin' hate that title. But that's what happens with record companies. They have these ideas to do things you can and can't do, and then suddenly years later you got something that you really regret the whole world can find. But anyway, to stay on topic, I gave that instrumental record to them as a part of the buyout for the contract, and I moved to LA. And so by that point, my voice had changed radically between when I recorded Fever Dream and then a year later when it was out. My voice was completely different. And so I went back and re-sang it, and I replayed the bass guitar, remixed it, and then that came out on that soundtrack for Bill and Ted, and that was released on Interscope. So, yeah, that's why that happened. Ironically enough, I never made a record for Interscope because I was really at that point knew the direction I wanted to take was much more of a soul direction. I wanted to do something that still, had cool guitar solos, but definitely way more, in the soul department. And I remember having all the songs picked out, and I was at Danny Korchmar's house, who had a huge record with Don Henley that he produced and co-wrote songs on. And Danny submitted a budget to my label, and I was so excited because I wanted to work with him in the worst way. And at the last minute, the record company said, "You know what? No." I'm like, "What do you mean?" They had initially approved the budget, and they changed their mind. And they said, "No." They said, "We didn't sign you to be this kind of artist." I'm like, "What are you talking about? These are the songs I wrote. That's obviously who I am. Somebody else isn't writing this music. This is my music." And they said, No. We signed you to be a hard rock artist. So either you're going to make a hard rock record or you're not going to make a record. And I said, well, and at that time I was 20 or 21 years old, and I really believed in what I was doing at the time, even though when I look back and listen to the songs now, most of them weren't that good. But anyway, I said, all right, well, then I'm not making a record, and I need to be let out of my contract. And so they did. And that's the one thing I'll give them credit for. They dropped me, and they didn't mess up my life. Because a lot of times when you have those record deals, they'll put their teeth into you for a long time, and I respect them for that. They let me go, and I actually went back home to Pennsylvania, and I was thinking, all right, now what the hell am I going to do? Because I was living off of the record company's money because I was in writing mode for the whole year here in LA. Well, that's what they do. They sign you, they move you here, they put you up, they give you money to live so you can work with producers and writers. So I was doing that. With the deal gone, so was my income. And so while I was in Pennsylvania, I still had my LA place. And the guy that dropped me from the lift said, listen, he said, I have an opportunity for you. He said, I know you're not going to want to do it. He said, but I think you should. And he told me that Bret Michaels had called him and was interested in me joining his band. And so I went back to LA. I met with Bret at his house. And I really liked him. And we had a great talk, and we talked about music and had a lot of things in common, stuff that we liked. And one thing led to another, and I decided, all right, I'll join Poison. And the guy from Interscope even said to me, look, go do this for a year, and then you come back and we'll make your record then. He said, I think you'll have a better understanding of what it is you want to do. And then by the time I left Poison, I did go back to that guy, and he was talking about re-signing me, and he said, we can't re-sign you because the label has gone in a completely different direction because the Chronic, was it? There's a couple of big rap records that they had, and they were, became really like a rap label, and I think they had Trent Reznor, so the whole direction changed, and so I ended up signing with Geffen, and then I made my record. I made a record for Geffen, and it was released in 1994.
Now, I've interviewed Beau Hill, and he talked all about Interscope. Is he the one you were working with?
No, it was Jimmy Iovine.
No?
Tom Wally was the guy that signed me.
Oh, interesting, because Beau Hill was there at the beginning, and then he left because of the direction turning to rap.
Well, Tom Wally was the guy that signed me. He actually came to because when he signed me, I lived in Pennsylvania. He came to my parents' house to meet us, and he's a great guy, really cool guy, and learned a lot from him. And he signed me, and then that's how I moved out. And then I met Jimmy, I guess he was pretty much the president of the label then. And I remember he had me at the house one time. I was playing football in the front lawn with Bruce Springsteen, and I didn't know shit about football, and I was a skinny, lanky kid. And finally, Tom looked at me and said, "Rich," he said, "why don't you just go sit down and watch?" Because I was screwing up the game, and then he pictured me just getting hurt, and that there wouldn't be any record made at all. So,
yeah,
it's pretty funny.
Nothing like getting embarrassed in front of Bruce.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he didn't know who the hell. I was just a skinny kid,
Now, the songs that you were working on then for your Interscope record, were those the songs that you brought into Poison, like Stand and Fire and Ice?
Those songs were written during that time. The song 7 Days Over You was done. That would have been an Interscope song. Stand would have been. Fire and Ice at that point was a riff, and then I later finished it. But yes, those were all songs that were current at the time that I had written. I mean, the same way with the Winery Dogs. I mean, I'm No Angel, Regret, Damage. Those are all songs that were pretty much done. They would have been solo songs had I not, joined up with those guys. So it's what I wrote at that time.
Now, at that time, a lot of the Shrapnel guys were getting plucked and pulled into big bands like Marty Freeman and whatnot. What was it about you that you think was attractive to Poison? Do you think that they were looking for somebody to somewhat legitimize them musically?
I think that's a huge part of it. Because think about a band like Poison who has had, sold, I don't know, at that point, when I joined the band, they had already sold about 15 million records. And they had, I think, 10 top 10 hits. It was some ridiculous thing. They had the tour that they had was in People magazine the year before as the highest grossing rock tour that year. So you're, talking about a band that's commercially super successful. However, they always had to hear about from their peers that they weren't great musicians, or the critics talking about, their musicianship, which to me nowadays is completely ironic because, I mean, there are musicians putting records out now that, make C.C. DeVille sound like John McLaughlin. I mean, it's just kind of comical. But back then, part of the rock thing, you had these bands with these amazing musicians, and so the standards for musicians was different, But for sure, to answer your question, Poison was absolutely looking for someone that could bring, I guess, what they would call more musical credibility to the project. And I guess the reason why it worked, and I like the record I made, I think the reason why it worked is because they allowed me to be myself. I mean, they gave me a lot of room, to the point where we had the choir. It was our producer's idea, but if the song hadn't been written, it would have never happened. But we had the South Central AME choir, church choir, come in and play and sing, our song "Stand." We had Sheila E. on the record. I mean, the Billy Powell from Leonard Skinner played on the record. It was like a whole other thing, and it was a fun record to make. We were in Rumbo. We were in a couple studios, A&M, Rumbo, and we had a ping pong table set up. I swear to God, half the day was spent on ping pong tournament, and then at some point towards the evening, we decided to start recording. It was a fun time.
And that was the first time you worked with Richie Zito, right?
Yeah, we hit it off immediately. Yeah, Richie became one of my best friends, and when I did my solo record after I left Poison. I brought him in to produce it. He's a great producer, a great guy.
Now, on that first solo record, again, well, it was musically, I would say it was an extension of some of the stuff you were doing in Poison, definitely. But how was that experience to jump in and be on a major label and be allowed to record what you wanted to record?
Well, it was, man, it's still not what you want. I mean, it's real interesting how the business was back then. And man, thank God it changed for me, because it was always frustrating. And I remember I got that deal. I had made a demo of 6 or 7 songs, and that's how I got the deal. And my wife at the time was a singer, so she was singing all these background parts, you know, like kind of gospel harmony type things. And we auditioned, well, not auditioned, but I met with one super successful producer at my house, and he's like, man, there's gospel harmonies. Do you really want that? And I'm like, why the fuck is he asking me this question? Well, no, I don't want that. That's why I recorded it that way. So, you know, I'm a complete idiot. I don't know what I want. So, like, yeah, obviously I want it. That's why they're there. So he goes, well, who's singing? And I told him, you know, it was Deanna singing. So he goes back to my label. I have a meeting the next day, and the A&R guy, for whatever reason, says to me, I didn't know your wife was singing on your demo. And this is after I already been signed. I already got my advance, everything. I'm like, yeah, she's singing all the harmonies. You know, I'm going to tell you right now, there are no women are going to be singing on your record. What are you talking about? And I'm thinking, like, hello, like, I'm thinking, like, you know, Black Crowes. I mean, there's plenty of, you know, Bob Seger. There's plenty of rock acts that have women, you know, singing behind a dude. And he's like, no, none of my artists. I'm done. I'm not doing it. I'm not working with women anymore. I'm like, wow, like this is insane. And that was just like tip of the iceberg of the weird, like non-artistic, nonsensical shit that I used to have to hear back then. That used to make me insane. So, you know, and what that does for an artist, as much as people hear records and they think, I really like this or like that, the artist still is stifled. So, like, you know, I'm still operating in my mind, I'm still at 75%. I'm not allowed to be at 100%. Because there's all these other egos that have to be meddling, you know. So that is a very frustrating thing. Now, nowadays, I think it's like, you know, the guys that are still in the business are the guys that have, you know, taste and understand how to deal with artists, and they're still surviving. But the ones, you know, that don't are out, you know.
And when that record came out, it seemed to be quietly released. And I found it was very telling that on your first record for Shrapnel, you were on the cover of a guitar magazine. And then when this comes out on a major label, there was a small little, maybe half-page, quarter-page little blurb in Guitar World.
Well, I'll tell you what happened with that record. When they signed me, it was a big deal as far as the size of the record deal. There was a publishing deal attached to it. And it was a really, you know, world-class record deal. And, you know, it was said to me that, you know, this is a 20-year career with you. You're going to be, you know, making box sets and, you know, all this stuff. And by the time I finished the record, the guy who signed me and gave me all the money and said all the nice things left the label. He wasn't there anymore. And so I had nobody working with me. And I remember going to the meeting with the publicist, and she was there was a big band called Counting Crows, and she was their publicist. And she took my CD and literally threw it at me. She goes, I don't get it. I just don't get it. I'm like, really? She goes, yeah, I don't get it. I said, okay. I said, well, I mean, I wish you could have told me that on the phone. I wouldn't have drove over here. And I left. And so Geffen basically said, well, we got to at least put this thing out, but we're only going to print up 15,000 copies, and we'll put it out in the store, and well, that's the end of it. We're not going to promote it at all. Somehow my manager was able to get me on tour with someone, so I did go out for a month in the States. However, in Japan, they got the record, and I guess MCA was distributing Geffen back then, I'm pretty sure. And the Japanese label got it and loved it, and they promoted the hell out of it and took me over there. And so I ended up losing my deal with Geffen, and then because things were going well in Japan, I ended up signing a direct distribution deal with a label in Japan, and then I had that door open for a while until it closed. But, it's just weird. The record business was, you needed a label back then. Now, you can make a record right in your garage and then turn around and sell it all over the world, and be self-contained. It's still hard to get the marketing, but without that machine, you still need someone to market you, but at least you can make a record that you want to make and you can share it with people and they can hear it.
After Mother's Head, you went back to Fusion. Well, I guess you did your first Fusion record, but you went back to Shrapnel.
Well, the relationship with Shrapnel, it wasn't that I went back to them. What happened was, I still wanted to work. I didn't have anything to do, really. So Mike had approached me and said, why don't you, said, I can't make a record, I can't put out like a soul record or an R&B record because my label doesn't do that. He said, but if you want to make like some kind of cool, more like a fusion type record, he said, we're getting into that. So I had nothing to do, and I said, I can write, some kind of crazy songs, fusion songs. So I went in and one summer, wrote a bunch of songs and odd time signatures and had Greg Bissonette come in and play drums, and Jeff Berlin played on a few songs. And then we put that out, and then I enjoyed the process. So then my friend Greg Howe, I talked to him, and he said, why don't we do something together? So then right after that, Greg and I did a record where we're kind of going back and forth playing. So there's a little period of time, and I was still doing the vocal stuff, putting out records.
Now, in your interview with Dean Del Rey, you talked about you had another deal in the States, and you presented them the song Rust, and that wasn't what they wanted to hear.
Oh, God, that was the dumbest thing I ever did. I remember that, yeah. When I got off I was very stubborn. I'm talking about how the business was and stuff, but, I wasn't always right either, But I remember I was in my manager's house, and we had this guy at RCA who was a very important executive, and he came down and met with us, and he was, at one point they were talking about buying the record from Geffen, the Motherhead Family Reunion record, and then they realized that wouldn't make sense, so they wanted to make another record. And my manager said to me, whatever you do, he said, don't play them your demos right now. I'm like, what do you mean? He said, don't play the demos, please. Because I had these demos, and they were like straight up like soul tunes. It sounded like Hall & Oates, basically. Mm-hmm. And I had the song Rust, and we had this meeting. It was a great meeting, and I just couldn't help myself. I had to play that song, because in my mind, I thought that song was a hit, and I thought he'd like it. So he listens to it.
Yeah.
And he goes, man, this is a really great song. He said, but it's not what I was expecting. I'm like, what do you mean? He said, well, I love the Motherhead Family Reunion album. He said, but this sounds like Hall & Oates. I'm like, well, I grew up outside of Philly, and, I'm a fan of, of Daryl's, and he goes, yeah. He said, that's all cool and everything, and you do this really well. He said, but this, I don't want to market you like this. So there I was again, having to it's like, fuck. I don't want to fucking make a hard rock, heavy metal record. I don't listen to this music. I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
I want to be what I am. And that's what I felt like I was, And there again, I was unable to do it, not allowed. So that happens a lot with artists, But I lost that opportunity because they were willing to sign me, but only if I was willing to do what they wanted me to do.
So you turned to funk, and you turned to Japan.
Why the Japan thing became attractive to me was because, first of all, they couldn't really tell me what to do because of the language barrier. And it's not in their, it's not in their style, to do that.
Uh-huh.
So I was able to just go in and make records and do whatever the hell I wanted. Although that record you're talking about, the record is called, here we go again. The record is called Wave of Emotion. However, it was never supposed to be called that. I did not want a record called Wave of Emotion. I had the song because it was a song that my ex-wife had written the chorus to, and I thought it was catchy. And then I wrote the chorus, she wrote the verse, whatever. We co-wrote it together, 50-50. And it's a song that I thought was catchy, and I thought it deserved to be on the record. But I don't want to call my record that. And so I had this picture of me standing in front of an industrial zone, and the record was called Degeneration. And my manager told me I'm not allowed to call it that. I'm like, why? and there was some implication to the war, and it was like, some kind of like nuclear, nonsense. And I'm like, you're kidding me. Now that never came from Japan. That came from him, worried. And so then I end up with this record called Wave of Emotion. So, it's, and then I went and made a ridiculous video for it too, but I could blame somebody for that too.
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's just if you're an artist that really knows what you want to do, you're better off just going out and doing it on your own, and then whatever happens, happens. If someone picks you up and wants to market you for who you are, then that's cool. But that whole thing of like, when you know what you want to do and you've got to constantly deal with people pulling you off in a different direction, that's frustrating. I'd rather be poor and do what I want than rich and have to, be somebody's bitch.
In 99, a strange thing happened, because in the course of 4 to 6 weeks, you had Mr. Big record, you had Break 'Em All Down, you had the blues record, Bipolar Blues, and Vertu. In like 4 to 6 weeks, they all came at the same time. How exactly does that happen?
Well, I had a deal in Japan for a solo record, and I was working on that. And shortly after I finished it, Mike Varney again from Shrapnel Records approached me to do like a project record. He said, "Why don't you do he said, I'm doing blues records now." He said, "Why don't you make me like pick out a bunch of songs, covers, and make me a record, and then you can throw some originals on there if you want." So that was just like a fun little project thing I recorded 1 month. I mean, I don't even think of that record really when I think of my records. It's like just some kind of fun little thing that I did 1 month to just to play. And then around the same time, I was approached to join Mr. Big, which I was already in Stanley Clarke's band at that part. I was already in Stanley Clarke's band, and I initially turned down Mr. Big, and the reason why was because, again, it was moving me in a direction I didn't want to go, and I took so much heat from the record industry for being in Poison. Like, I couldn't have a meeting with a major label without someone talking about, well, how do we market him? Because he was in Poison, and that's not really a cool band. And I kept trying to explain to them, listen, man, the record I'm going to make has nothing to do with what Poison does. There's no reason to even mention the word Poison. But of course, because it was a big band, they want to capitalize and try to, do what they can. But, again, my point was there's no correlation. No one's going to know that I was even in the band if you market me as a new artist and a new record. Let them discover it after the fact. The music will speak for itself. So anyway, I dealt with that for years, and then with Mr. Big, although I really like a lot of their songs and I love the guys, I did not want to go and join another band that had ties to 80s rock. I thought that was like a really stupid thing for me, considering everything I went through. And now I had a gig with Stanley Clarke, which could really erase whatever bullshit stigma people wanted to put on me. So I said no. And then they came at me again, and they came to my house, Billy and Pat, and sat down in my kitchen and said, listen, it's not, you're worrying about stuff you don't have to worry about. We want to work with you. You're going to write with us. And the reality is right now, our band only really is functioning in Japan. So it's not going to affect any stigma you have in the United States. And, we had a long conversation, and then I decided to do it because I wanted to play with Billy and Pat Torpy. And so I ended up, and of course Eric, I wanted to do it after I talked with them and realized that, it would be a fun musical thing to do. So I did 2 records with them. I did 2 tours in Japan. We did a couple shows in the United States, never went to Europe, never went to South America. And so that was that. But I remember I had to leave in the middle of making the Mr. Big record to go on tour with Stanley. And it was a busy year.
Now tell me about that, being in a band with Stanley. Especially with, you had a fusion background, but not Stanley's level of fusion. How was that for you?
Well, I mean, Stanley's a jazz musician. I mean, I don't, I like to listen to jazz, and I definitely have some, elements of jazz in my approach to what I do, but I'm not a jazz guy. I mean, I don't know any standards, and, I don't sit around, playing over changes all day long. So, I was surprised when I got the gig. I remember going and auditioning, and they put a music in front of me to read, and I started laughing, and he wanted to know why I was laughing. I said, because I don't read. I can't sight read. And I know what these notes are. I can read music,
Yeah.
but I'm not going to be able to sight read this tune and just play it. So he said, all right, well, let me show it to you. So he got behind the piano, he showed me the changes and the melody, and I played, and then we did some improv stuff. And after about 2 hours being there, I said, well, guys, I don't think there's any way in hell you're going to hire me, but I just want to say it was an honor to actually be in the room with you and play. It was really cool. And then I went out that night, I think it was Halloween, right around there, and I believe it was Kiss was playing. I went to see Kiss that night. I'm almost 100% sure that's what I did. And I came home from the concert, and I had a voicemail on my phone that they loved me and I got the gig, and that was that.
What was it about you that you think was appealing to them?
Well, I think they looked at me as like kind of a clay or something that they could kind of mold into whatever they needed me to do. Because I had the dexterity and the knowledge of the fretboard to pretty much play anything that they were capable of writing. And I guess when we improvised, I was able to work through. Now, there were some things that were difficult for me because there was one song that was it went into a straight jazz, kind of a thing. And so I ended up recording those progressions, and I just listened to them endlessly until finally I heard my way through and I could improvise through those jazz changes. But I think Stanley realized that I had the kind of ears that would pick up fast what they were doing, and I also had the physical facility on the instrument to execute, what it was that they wanted to do. And so that's probably why I got it. And they wanted a guy that had more of a rock edge. They didn't want a straight jazz player because even jazz and rock guys don't play the same. We don't feel music the same. We don't get the same kind of tones. It's two different worlds, and they wanted that more aggressive rock element, but still, harmonically, more of a jazz thing.
Now Stanley's playing gigs again. Any chance of you guys working together again in the future?
Oh, I would love to, but a funny story. About 2 years ago, I was in this restaurant, and I saw Stanley walk in, and I walked over to him, and I decided to play a joke. I pretended I was the host, and I walked up to him, and he had dark glasses on, and I said, Mr. Clarke, we've been waiting for you to arrive. Please follow me. I'll take you to your table. And he said, oh, thank you. And he starts walking, Stanley has a very distinct walk, And then suddenly I look at him and he realizes, wait a minute. He said, oh, man, he gives me a big hug, and, we talked for a while. So the last time I saw him was probably about 2 years ago.
It was done sometime around there.
Now, what I find the most interesting. What is was released in 1998.
It did, eh?
Yeah, 98 is what it is.
What I found the most interesting about What Is, it's a great record, but it was the fact that you started selling it on your website.
I did?
At that point, oh, you did, because I bought it from your website.
Oh, wow.
So that was the first band that I was aware of that kind of said, okay, you had your Japanese deal, so you had distribution over there, but in terms of North America, you said piss on it, and you started selling them on the website.
Right.
Well ahead of everybody else doing the modern CD baby route or however else people do it themselves.
Right.
But what led you to decide to start selling it yourself?
I don't know. Somebody told me to do it. Someone said, hey, why don't you just sell it on your website? And then I guess I don't think that lasted very long because I didn't have the infrastructure to really do it correctly. It involved me going to the post office, standing in line, so I probably abandoned that pretty quick. But, I guess, it's like you deal with what options you have, man. It's like, well, I can't, for whatever reason, I can't get a record deal. Nobody wanted to sign me. I was still hearing about Poison. So, I'm not going to not make music because that's the only thing I really enjoy doing, So I guess I must have thought, well, let me try and sell it myself. But, obviously once CD Baby came along, they made it a lot easier for everybody.
But yeah, because I guess you did go back to Frontiers for a while there. You had a few records with them.
Yeah, that was for Europe.
Led to the end of that relationship.
They were for Europe. They distributed in Europe back then. Now, eventually, I think they distribute worldwide as well. So they're one of the labels that still does it. The problem is there's really, in my opinion, and that's why I stopped working with them. There's no reason to sign with a record label unless you know that you're really going to get what you need out of it. And so, for example, the Winery Dogs signed with Loud and Proud because we were confident that we were going to get what we needed. And they did a fabulous job with our record, and they still are. And when I was talking earlier about the people that really care about the artists and know how to deal with artists, they're still in the business. They're still successful. They're still doing it. And so, that's how I was at a point where it's like, I have a way to distribute this. Unless the label's going to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to market me, there's no reason to get in bed with them because they have nothing to offer. What are they going to do? Put my record out? Well, it's already out. And you're not going to put it in the store. You're not going to put a record in the store anyway, unless there's a demand. You have a big enough base to buy it. So that's not even a point. And people are downloading more than anything. So there's like 2006, I guess, when I really just realized I don't need to do anything with a label to survive. I can make the record I want to make. I can get it out there. I can go tour on it, and I can live the way I want to live. So that's just the reality of it. Now, like I said, with the Loud and Proud label, the Winery Dogs are on, they're doing a fabulous job. A lot of wonderful things happen for the band that would have never happened without them. So, it's still possible to get a good label-artist relationship. But if you can't get that, you can put stuff out on your own and still have a career.
Now, with the Winery Dogs, it's an interesting thing because it's probably, as a vocalist, your biggest success yet. But it's not terribly far removed from what you've been doing for the last 25 years.
Right.
How do you not become bitter that it's like 25 years of doing the same thing and you're suddenly an overnight sensation?
Well, because I don't really care about the
okay.
I don't really care about accolades. A lot of musicians do. Like a lot of musicians, they're driven by that, and that's why they do it. And I went through so much, like I was talking earlier, so much disappointment and just being let down with the music business that I readjusted my thought process. So actually, I read a book, too, that helped me by Osho called Creativity, Unleashing the Forces Within. And there's so many, as I was reading that book, there were so many things like, well, I really do think this way. This is really how I feel. Like, it was like, it was just spelling out, like, my blueprint of how my brain works, and I was unable to really, after reading that, I just embraced this. And no, that's reality. So I can't get into all the details of that, but the point of the matter is my motivation. It's like I make music because I love to make music, but I only love it when it's music that I want to make. So like I don't want to be mad at music, and that can happen if I'm suddenly asked to play a cover song that I think sucks, or if I have to go play in a situation that is not a situation I want to be in. It's like I learned what it is that's important. I would imagine it would be pretty cool to win a Grammy Award, but then I see some of the people that win those awards, and it just kind of negates the whole thing. So I don't think in terms of external goals. I think in terms of internal goals, which are things that I actually can make a difference about. I can become a better singer. I can learn another style on the guitar. I can go in my studio and write a song and do it from top to bottom and have it sound exactly like what I heard in my head when I press play. Those are the kind of successes I can control. I can't force you to like or buy my record, so why should I care about it? That doesn't mean I don't appreciate someone responding favorably. Of course, I love that. That's great because I'm making a human connection with someone, and that's an amazing feeling. But no one can just run around and think, all right, I'm going to go connect with, 1 million people. I'm going to make these 1 million people love me. It's like that's a real superficial, kind of dark way to think that I think it can be very, very empty. So I guess to answer your question, like I said when you asked it, I just really don't care about that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. And what point along the line did you just decide, okay, enough trying to have a hit record or whatever, I'm just going to make the music I want to make?
I think
Was it the point where you started kind of doing your own distribution?
I had elements of that. I mean, there was elements of that when even when I did the Geffen record. I mean, in general, I made the record I wanted to make. I was handicapped on that record because I couldn't have women singing background vocals or certain things I couldn't do. They wouldn't allow me to self-produce it. So I was handicapped in that situation, but I still was like, that was the record I wanted to make at the time. Those were the songs that I believed in. And so I've had elements of that all along the way. But I think when I did the Into the Black record, I wasn't aware that I was even making a record. It was like one summer I recorded 4 or 5 songs, and then I didn't do anything musical for a few months. Then I went back and listened to them, and then I wrote a couple more. And then all of a sudden, I was like, man, these 10 songs sound good together. This sounds like a record. And the last thing I wanted to do was play it for someone and ask them to give me money so that then they could say, well, I like this song. We'll change that lyric. I don't understand why you're saying that. And, well, I wish the guitars had more distortion. I didn't want to hear all that. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to master this thing. I'll make up some artwork, and I'll just make it available and see what happens. And somehow that record, amongst my fan base, has become one of the more talked about records. And I think probably because there's a certain honesty in it, and maybe that was probably the first record from top to bottom where I didn't have any kind of anything to worry about, like nothing. It wasn't, even on the record before that, Get Up, that was kind of like an Into the Black approach, but I still was taking money from a record label, so I still had to be aware that they need to be able to market me to a base so they can get their money back. That's how they think. So with Into the Black, I didn't have that looming over me, so it really probably was the most honest record from top to bottom. I hate saying that because I don't want to discredit the other, because the other ones, were what I wanted to do at the time too, but there were still elements of, well, I better not go too far in that direction because, I'm going to piss somebody off,
Or at least, I think this will be successful versus I really just want to write for what I want to write whatever I want to hear.
I've never been successful like that, so I don't know how to write to be successful. I mean, I just write what I write. Honestly, I just write what I write, and once I like it, I make it available to people. But, it's hard to talk about because now I'm thinking about the record change, and I'm thinking, that's pretty much, that record sounds exactly like what I wanted it to sound like. I mean, most of them do. I guess it's just that I don't have to listen to someone make suggestions that I don't want to hear. I don't mean like music. I don't mean like writers. Like if I'm writing with someone, that's a different story. I just mean like someone feels like they got a hand in you because they're giving you money. That's really where I get.
Yeah. Nothing's free. If somebody's giving you money, they've automatically bought themselves a say.
And they're not wrong. I mean, look, if I invest $50,000 in some artist because I think I can sell them to, people that are buying Rihanna records, and then suddenly they give me, an instrumental polka record, I'm going to be pretty fucking mad.
Yeah, of course. Now, on the Into the Black record, I noticed the cover looked like a takeoff of a Prince cover. Was he an influence on that record?
I know what you mean, and I didn't, that was purely by accident, because I took a picture of myself on my digital camera, and I didn't didn't like the way my full face looked. And then I figured, what if I just put half of my face on there? And then I photoshopped it, and then that was the end of it. But I didn't know that Prince did the same thing. I think a couple other, there's a lot of people that put half their face on an album cover. But
yeah, sure.
When I was making those decisions, I wasn't thinking about what Prince might have done, 15 years ago.
Yeah, I thought perhaps you were kind of, and maybe in some of the music you were channeling a little Prince or something, and you wanted to do a little homage.
Yeah, if I was channeling Prince, I wouldn't want anyone to know about it. So if I copied his album cover, I'd be pretty much an idiot. That'd be pretty stupid. So I definitely didn't do that consciously. But what I will say about Prince is that I really love what he was doing earlier in his career, and he was definitely an influence on me and a person that inspired me and gave me confidence to believe that I could be an artist. That I will say, and really in my early 20s, I really paid a lot of attention to the Sign of the Times record. I loved that record. And just the fact, to me, he was a real artist as it relates to music, because he is someone that can write his own song. He can go in the studio and play everything that needs to be played, be it drums or bass or whatever the hell it is. And he can do it in a way that when people hear it, they respond and they connect. And then he can get on stage and play it better than anybody. So he, to me, I would have to say, is the most complete artist. And, could you imagine, if that was the standard, you had, all right, I'm a recording artist. Okay, well, then you need to be able to go in and record. So go turn the studio on and go do this and do it. Could you imagine if that was where the bar was set? Most of the records that are being made today, they wouldn't even be made. And
as a lifelong Kiss fan, how was it to work with Gene Simmons on a solo record?
No, that was really cool. That was very interesting how that happened. I had met Gene way before that. There was a guy that was a consultant for them, and that man was my manager at one time. And so he introduced me to Gene and Paul. And I was probably maybe 23 or 24 when I met them. But then years later, I had bought a commercial building in North Hollywood and turned it into a recording studio. And somebody said, well, Gene's looking for a place to record, and they brought him in. And it was me and my engineer. And he walks in, he goes, I need to listen to this. And he hands me some kind of a tape that was a format that nobody used anymore. It was DA88 or something. No one uses this, man. So I got scared. I'm like, oh no, don't tell me it's going to start off like this. So I had to scramble, and then we rented one of these machines, and then from there everything went smoothly. And yeah, he was a cool guy. I got to meet his family, and we a few years ago we played some songs together on New Year's Eve at this club in Hollywood, and I got on stage with him for another thing recently. But he's really a great guy, and really liked him a lot.
Really supportive of the Winery Dogs. He's been pretty vocal about it.
Yeah, it was funny, man. We got into some kind of thing on Twitter where, he posted something, and then he said something about me shaving my beard. And then I found a picture of me when I was a little kid dressed like him, and I posted that and said to him, this is what I look like when I shave. And then he responded, he said, seriously, and he said something, and he said, you're not in Mumford & Sons.
Nice. Did you shave?
Yeah, there's a video of shaving. If you go on YouTube, on my channel, there's a video of me shaving my whole beard.
Oh, funny. There you go, Gene. But I did see the new video. Did you put one up? I think it was yesterday or the day before. You put a new video up for your new Best Of album?
Yeah, there's a package, a really cool thing that the record label Loud and Proud, I talked about them earlier, and they're going to release a compilation record for me. And it has 2 new songs on it, and that thing that's on the internet is just a little promo thing that I did with my iPhone. And that song is going to be on the record, Walk With Me. and there's another song that's new called War Paint. But what we did was I took, like, I don't know how many, maybe 10 or 11 songs from the last, 10, 15 years, and put it on a record with 2 new ones. And then I made another CD of re-records of older songs. I think What Is on there, the song High. And I did different kind of treatments, like on those 2 songs, I've got upright bass and percussion. There's an original demo of the song Damaged that it became a Winery Dogs song, but long before that, I had this recording with a drum machine, and it's a totally different treatment. That's on there. So there's a bunch of things, and then there's a bunch of videos. So there's probably 30-plus songs on this package. And the reason they did this is because a lot of people that are being turned on to the Winery Dogs never really knew much about me outside of what I did earlier on in my career. And I mean, there's people even, oh, no, I never knew Richie sang, which is kind of comical. Like, I've been singing for more than half my life, but that's okay. So they said, well, why don't we put something together that, people are curious, because there's like 20-some records out there. No one knows, like, where to start. So if you buy this thing, I picked everything, so you're getting, like, what I think is my best work. And, it's just something kind of cool for, people that really don't know who I am.
I heard that Mr. Big are working on a new record. So does that mean there's going to be a new Richie Kotzen solo record coming up too, now that you've got some time?
That's what I'm finishing right now, actually. I've got a bunch of things recorded, and I'm fine-tuning them. And, there's going to be something coming out brand new at the beginning of next year.
And are Loud and Proud going to do that one as well?
Yes, that's the plan.
Brilliant. That's great. Now, the new music video, you touched upon it, iPhone video, and you're very clear about that. And that really continues the process you've had of do-it-yourself. Like, I think even, wasn't Electric Joy done on like an 8-track, and then you did the drums later?
Some of it. I really want people to understand. I want people to understand this do-it-yourself thing, and because it's not because that's what I want to do. Like, in other words, like, I really wish, like, I could have recorded that Electric Joy on an SSL with an engineer and a good assistant engineer and a catering budget. I really wish that I could make a video for Walk With Me and have some helicopters to get some aerial shots and a great editor and, a great camera guy and director with a great concept. But the reality is I don't have all those options. I don't have all that. So really I have 2 options. I can do nothing, or I can do what I can. And if I do what I can and I look at the end result and I think it's, charming or acceptable or does something positive for the creative cause, then I can put it out. And if not, I can leave it on my hard drive and no one will know about it.
But you've done half a dozen music videos on your own now. You must get some enjoyment out of it.
I do enjoy it. It's really fun. I really like it. It's just another little, creative thing to do. And what's even funnier, it's like, okay, how do I do this with an iPhone and no light rig and no nothing? You know what I mean? Just like an editing software. So it changes, it's like trying to build a house with, sticks and mud, see if I can pull this off. So, it can be fun. It's challenging, it's creative, and I do enjoy it, definitely.
And I'll wrap this up with the Monsters of Rock cruise. I was on there and I saw your shows, and I've seen you've already been announced for the next year's cruise. How was it for you being on that cruise? Because that's an interesting experience, I'd say, being so close to the fans.
Yeah, I was really scared to go because I had just seen that Captain Phillips movie. Nice. And so and then another person sent me some YouTube video of a boat, like a big boat like that from the inside, and like shit was flying all over because there was a storm. So I was really, really kind of freaked out about it. But then once I did it, I really enjoyed it. We stopped off at this little island called Monster Island. I think it has something to do with the cruise line. But it was amazing. The water was amazing. And I love the beach. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And, like, everybody on the boat was cool, too. Like, because you figure, you're on this thing and everyone's going to be wasted and vomiting and creating chaos. But it really wasn't like that. It was really cool, very civilized, and a lot of fun.
And I have to actually ask about Winery Dogs in terms of what's coming up. I know you've got a dog camp. You've just released a live record. Is there going to be a new studio record coming up from that as well?
Yeah, we're planning on that. We have one new song that we wrote earlier in the year when we were together at Mike's house, and the plan is to finish out this album cycle. We're coming over a year now since the release, and we've been touring on and off ever since. And especially in the United States, it's been awesome, and we'll have done over 3 months worth of shows by the time we're done, which is way more than I expected. I expected it to be interesting, and maybe there's some people that like it, but it's just really cool to be playing these songs. And the first time we went out, people were curious. They didn't really know, and now the second time out, they're singing the lyrics. So it's pretty neat. So it just means that people like the band, and it kind of excites us. So we're looking forward to going back in and writing some new music.
It must be nice for you to be touring the States again too. It's probably the first extensive tour since Poison, where you've got to play in your homeland.
I know. That's right. That's absolutely right. It's really a good feeling. I get to use my cell phone freely and not have to worry about overcharges.
And there it is, an in-depth look at Richie Kotzen's career. You can find more about him at richiekotzen.com, and he's also really active on Twitter. That's it for this week's show. We'll see you again next Monday.